After reaching an all-time high around the globe in January 2021, global COVID-19 case numbers are beginning to drop. That's certainly welcome news. Behind this is better management by world governments, greater scientific and medical knowledge about the behaviours of COVID-19, vaccination rollouts, and a larger proportion of communities adhering to mask wearing and social distancing. Here in Thailand, following a second scare and several clusters breaking out around provinces close to Bangkok, the situation is now returning to the position we were in during November last year. Borders largely closed, mask wearing and social distancing regimes, and travel restricted to domestic destinations only. Today, we'll look at the larger world travel picture in this COVID era, and then we'll check out the latest opportunities if you want to come back to Thailand for travel. So when can we pack the bags and travel again? Well, in theory, right now. But in practice, depending on where you're coming from and where you want to go, that may still be very complicated, and remain so for at least the rest of this year. But some of the world's travel so-called experts are now speaking in terms of months and not years. Whilst some of that might be optimistic travel industry spin, there may be some greater certainty on reopenings of some sectors of the world travel industry in the next few months. But first, consider all the variables that need to fall into place for things to go smoothly. Despite the rollout of various vaccines, and more on the way, some countries are more advanced in that process than others. The appearance of virus mutations could send all the best guesses for an improvement in travel opportunities into disarray. Whilst it seems the vaccines will be a great benefit for victims to avoid the worst ravages of COVID-19, there's still a long way to go to measure the longer-term effects on the changes in transmission and community immunity. In the short to medium term, most governments are going to take a cautious approach, whilst investigating creative options like travel bubbles or limited travel to adjacent territories. But most travel bubbles burst before they could even start. Still, some governments are still talking up the green lanes and travel bubbles as a viable option. There are, right now, some destinations that we can fly to. You can fly from some destinations in the US directly to the Caribbean, for example. Over the UK winter, travellers could fly to Dubai from London. That was all going well until the infection numbers started to spike. But even now, Dubai remains one of the easiest destinations to enter. That's in stark contrast to New Zealand and Australia, which have taken an almost fortress type of approach to protect their populations. Around Asia and Europe, there's still flights you can catch, but you're usually paying high fares and have to face a lot more in the way of delays, postponements, or even cancellations. It's certainly not like the pre-COVID days, and even the most optimistic travel pundits don't think, from the current perspective, that we can expect much improvement until 2022. But even Australia's flag carrier Qantas, one of aviation's long-haul stars, announced last week that it plans to resume international flights on a highly reduced scale by the end of October this year. If you do want to travel right now, you should do some extensive homework into every aspect of the trip. Things that were just a click on a website just over a year ago are now mired in paperwork. Contacting embassies, buying additional health or specific COVID insurance, new procedures at airports, and a lot fewer choices of where to go. You also need to be fully aware of the challenges you could face with your return journey. Don't even think about booking anything until you're up to date with all the procedures necessary to return to your home country. Chris Gota, the head of corporate communications at IATA, the International Air Transport Association, says the restrictions and lockdowns are probably as strict as they've ever been, particularly in parts of Europe and the US. He says they're hopeful there's light at the end of the tunnel, but do expect long-haul travel to be the last thing to recover. He also noted that a lot of business travel is long-haul, and that may take some time to recover as businesses look after their cash after all the challenges and expenses they've had to face. For Europe, the UK and US, the summer season is not far away, and the travel industry is hopeful that there might be some relaxation of restrictions and border controls by the middle of the year. IATA says the governments will face greater pressure to relax quarantine restrictions, especially to neighbouring countries, rather than to longer haul destinations. They also said they don't anticipate many travel options to open up to US travellers until the pandemic is under control. The other hot topic in world travel is COVID passports. This is where you'll have to carry proof of vaccination as a separate document or part of your current passport. Exactly how this will operate with all the various vaccines and who will administer it is yet to be worked out. Getting all governments on board with the rules and regulations on this type of international paperwork could presumably take years. But there will be many airlines and governments that will insist on proof of vaccination before they will allow travel and access. So this is a looming challenge that the world faces before it can more broadly open up to international travel. But putting all the challenges aside, the world is now facing a much more travel-averse public. People will be both less willing to travel long distances or simply unable to because of the economic problems they face, either through losing their jobs or having their hours cut. There's no doubt local staycations are going to be more popular than long-haul travel for the medium to long term. For now, as of the start of March 2021, Thailand remains a difficult choice for travellers for business or pleasure. There are several visas available, notably the extended tourist visa and the special tourist visa, which can provide a short and longer-term travel visa. People who are virtually stuck in the country, either through problems in getting flights, restrictions for their return to their home country, or simply because they wish to stay in Thailand, are able to extend their current tourist visas every 60 days with a visit to their local immigration office and payment of 1,900 baht. But as of now, there's still a mandatory 14-day quarantine in place for anyone arriving in Thailand. If you're a foreigner, it will be at your cost. The government says it's looking at options to reduce the quarantine time, but as of now, the mandatory quarantine is still in place. Travellers also have additional paperwork and insurance required before entering the kingdom. The world travel industry may have been irretrievably dented from this pandemic. At the heart of the industry's challenges are the simple fact that the growth of cheap and available world aviation was the perfect partner for a viral outbreak. The swiftness and extent of the pandemic happened on the back of the sheer amount of people travelling across borders and taking the virus with them. Airlines and governments will be steering a cautious path ahead to try and avoid extending this pandemic, whilst being aware that this could easily happen again. Tim Newton reporting for the Thaiger.